Hi, my name is Rich DuBose. I'm Director of Creative Ministries for the Pacific Union Conference, and we're here to celebrate creativity, to talk about the arts and how we can use it to help tell God's story. And once again, I'm with my co-host, Greg Evans.
Hi, Rich.
Hi.
Good to see you.
And we have two guests that we're excited about.
We do. We have Paul Zenk, who is a cinematographer, director of photography, very talented man that we're going to be talking to in our second portion of our show. And we also have Sari Fordham, who is a professor at La Sierra University. We're going to start with you, Sari, and tell us about what you do at La Sierra.
I have the great fortune of heading up the creative writing emphasis that we have. So I get to teach creative writing classes. I mentor student writers. I teach the writing for publication class, which is great. Lots of La Sierra students get published all over the place. And what I'm doing right now that's new, fairly new from last year, is I'm the faculty editor for the Roadrunner Review. It's a student-run literary journal for students, and the mission is to provide a beautiful publishing venue. And it's open for both Adventist and non-Adventist students. Mm-hmm. And we get submissions from all over the world. I just read a submission this evening from South Korea, Nigeria, England, Ireland, United States, Canada, and we've published writers from all over the world as well as various Adventist universities.
So. Do you have any guidelines that they can write about anything? Or
we do have guidelines. One is that our intention is to give people a vivid reading experience. So all of our prose pieces are 1,000 words or less. It's online, and so you can go there and read something really fast. The other guideline is that we really are interested in place-specific pieces. We don't only take place-specific, but that's going to be the kind of work that's going to particularly draw our attention. We're the Roadrunner Review, and so we think of it as like this very mischievous animal that's from the La Sierra region, but it also travels, and so it kind of captures kind of our maybe mischievous mindset, but also our kind of we know where we're from, and we're really interested in telling stories of where other people are from.
So you call them stories, not articles.
Yeah, so we do fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Mm-hmm. So it's not really, we don't yet have a place for like academic pieces.
When you say place specific, are you talking about geographic?
You know, place can be also a living room or a kitchen.
Okay.
So kind of attentive to where the character is and how the character interacts with location. I will say, though, that we have taken some amazing pieces that don't have as strong a place focus, but primarily we like to kind of have some grounding on where we're located within a poem or within a short story or within a nonfiction piece.
One of the real tenets of this show is to provide artists of any medium opportunities. And that's so exciting that you are living that through this for literary purposes. And we've talked to painters and photographers and musicians that are involved with similar things, but it's really great to see our university students have that opportunity to post things to this site. How does the review, if somebody does post something, is there, or submit something is a better word, I think, but is there a review process that you or others go through to check quality, or to just,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we get about 300 submissions for maybe 15 pieces that we publish.
Oh, wow.
So it actually ends up being a competitive process. So I will receive the material first, and we have a student editorial team, and we all work together at reading, voting, and it's a very collaborative process. Pieces I have loved have not slipped in. Sometimes I'll slide in a piece that the students like less than I do, but they are really great, discerning, fantastic readers who through working on the Roadrunner Review, have developed a really strong editorial eye. And so I really enjoy working with the students and kind of seeing their editorial tendencies really kind of strengthening.
And just to reiterate again for our viewers, anyone can submit you don't have to be a La Sierra student. From all over the world, you've received submissions.
The only criteria is you have to be a student.
A student.
Yeah. So when you're a student and you're doing that first submission, maybe you're submitting to Virginia Quarterly Review, you're up against professors in MFA programs. It's a very kind of daunting submission process. And so we wanted to create a home where students would be amazingly proud to be published there, but that it would be exclusively student-focused. We do allow grad and undergrad students, and we've had high school students submit as well. And in the spring, we have a high school writing contest where we focus entirely, that contest is for high school students, but for our regular issues, we'll consider high school student work as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're of the belief that even rejection makes better writers.
Yes.
Right? Many iconic writers that we know of in our world today, or from years past, got rejected many times. Yeah.
Yes.
Some of the greats.
Yes. So we want to make sure that we have a nice rejection that's going to encourage writers to submit again.
Yeah.
And actually, for the high schools, students, our editorial team gives personal rejections for every high school student who submits, because we know it's probably their first submission. And so when we write their rejection, we mention something that we particularly enjoyed about their piece. So we've been able to do that really kind of personalized response. We don't honestly do that for every writer. At a certain point in the career, it might feel just give me the form rejection. But if it's your very first submission and you get a detailed response that points out something you did really well in your piece, hopefully that encourages.
So it's constructive.
Yeah. We don't do critiques in it. So we'll just normally praise something encouraging, so that the writer won't say, I got rejected, this is it for me on writing. Yeah.
Since we're talking about it, we do have a picture of the Roadrunner Review. Let's show that picture, and then we can segue into another project that you're working on.
Okay, so this is the memoir I have coming out in 2021, which seems like I would still be working on it, but I'm pretty much done with the edits. It's just the production stuff. It's with Etruscan Press, and so I'm excited about this memoir because it's an Adventist missionary story, but it's being published with a non-Adventist press. And I think if you think about it, there's a lot of stories out there in mainstream presses from other religious groups, but I don't think you see too many Adventist stories, and so I very much wanted to write for a non-Adventist press because I wanted our stories to go a little bit wider. When I was a child, my parents were missionaries in Uganda. They went there when Idi Amin was dictator. And so they didn't know why nobody else wanted to go to Uganda. It was pre-internet. And so when they arrived there, they learned a little bit about what the political situation is, and they stayed in Uganda for 6 years, and then they were in Kenya for 3 years after that. And so the memoir is really looking at my mother, who is from Finland. And when my sister and I were teens, we thought she was really timid. She wouldn't drive at night. She chewed pills instead of just swallowing them. She seemed to have a lot of fears. And when I was 25, she died. And so at that time, I had one idea of who my mother was. And then I found all these letters that she had written from Uganda. And it felt like every letter was saying, we're still here, we're still here. And in some ways, it was her voice was still here. And in the letters, it kind of dawned on me how strong and brave and courageous she was. And I had a re-understanding of who my mother was. Wow. And Wait for God to Notice was a line from one of those letters. So she was writing about, in Uganda at that time, people were earning about 20 cents an hour, and inflation went to such an extent that to buy a roll of toilet paper was $5. And so if you think about the like the problems you have just day-to-day life, let alone the politics. And so she wrote about $5 rolls of toilet paper, which is something a woman would understand and appreciate, how that impacts regular families. And then she wrote, after, wait for God to notice. Right. So all these horrific things were happening around us, but it was like the cost of toilet paper that made my mother really think about, is God noticing like this economic inequality and, this poverty that's in this place where she is.
Which I think that sounds like a song title to me.
It does.
What do you think?
Yeah. And then the Roadrunner Journal.
On the next slide.
Is the journal that we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you get started in your writing career and being an English professor?
I took a really great English class. It's what an English teacher can only hope for. I took a creative writing class at Southern Adventist University with Helen Pike, and I loved it. I loved the freedom I had to write stories that were outside of like the 5-paragraph essay per se. And I went to Thailand as a student missionary, and I started writing about my experiences there in a creative format, and I felt like the format of creative writing really allowed me to write more of what I wanted to write about my time than anything else. So then after that, I attended Iowa State University and got my master's in creative writing, and then I went to the University of Minnesota and got my MFA. And between that, I traveled around a lot. I think everyone should do that. Do as much traveling as you can. And then now I'm here in Riverside, and I've been here for quite a while. It always surprises me that I've been in one place for 12 years, because up until then, 2 years was about the max for me.
Yeah. So do you ever have writer's block where you're sitting there and the screen is...
I'm a mom, so I can't.
Okay.
I have so many ideas and so little time right now. I really recommend Parenthood as like the best thing for preventing writer's block. I've heard other people say it, but when I sit down, normally it's like, which of the 10 things that I want to write about am I going to use this 2 hours of writing time for? Yeah. Previously I do, but I did have writer's block, but now when you're doing other things, when I'm driving to work, I'll be thinking of things I'd like to write about. And so when I sit down, the words don't always come really fast, but the ideas are there. I have a lot of things that, I care passionately about the world. That's another thing about being a parent. The more you care about the world, the more things you want to write and respond to.
Do you find that you need alone time to write? Can you do it? You're obviously a busy person with kids, with a career that you're very successful at, and balancing all of that. Is it good to get away for you, or can you just write in the midst of kids running around the house?
Depends on where I'm at with the project. Yeah. I do a lot of time with a babysitter, and then I'll go to a coffee shop. So that's how I get a lot of the writing time done. I have on the weekends gone elsewhere. We have friends with a cabin in the woods, and so I sometimes go there and escape and do writing. But when I'm kind of 2/3 through like an essay, and I'm starting to feel that momentum, the kind of momentum you don't have in the beginning of it, where every word is hard and it takes time. But when I'm about 2/3 through, my kid can be crying for supper, and I'm like, here's some string cheese. I have 3 more sentences. I just have to write. And that's when I know I'm almost done with the piece
stretch.
And it's not even that, maybe it's 2/3, but that last third is going to go a lot faster because I have momentum, I'm committed, I know what the voice is, I've learned what the piece is going to be, and that's when it's really easy. But when I'm doing the first 2/3, I can't write when there's a lot of other things going on. So I go and hide and go to a coffee shop.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's great that you've shared with us some interesting things. I love to write as well, and finding the time is a challenge.
What's your favorite genre?
I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that. I just like to write about life, things that I experience.
Maybe nonfiction.
Probably mostly nonfiction, but
poetry, songs.
Yeah.
I'd love to read your stuff. I didn't know you wrote. I don't know how I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and wish we had more time. That's the problem always, Greg.
It is. It's such great people.
Because we want to learn more and hear more.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
But I want to move over to Paul here. And I have known Paul for a number of years now. I'm not even sure how many, Paul, but it's been a number of years.
It has been. We first met in Santa Clarita back in 1992.
Wow.
And it was my wife.
Okay.
Who knew that you were in media and went up and gave you my business card.
Okay.
And said, "Hey, my husband does video. You need to hire him."
You need to hire him. And I didn't.
It was but we remembered each other.
Yeah, I didn't for many years because we had other things going. And then circumstances worked out to where I needed somebody and you were available. And lo and behold, I live up in the Sacramento area now. And Paul lives about what?
I'm about an hour. I'm on the other side of Sacramento, on the north
up in
side.
Colfax.
Yeah, up in Colfax.
Going up to 80.
Yeah.
And so Paul has helped me with videography and...
How many projects have you guys done together?
I have not really counted them all.
I actually did. The end of last year, we had done 85 projects together.
Wow.
And we're pushing 90 now.
Yeah.
Because we did a bunch right at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So it's been accelerating somewhat.
So tell our audience about yourself a little bit and how you got into film production.
My father was a photojournalist and journalist for the military, and he worked for the DoD, the Department of Defense, and he also was the commander of a psychological battalion in Europe. And that's when I lived in Europe. But he always had a camera. Most pictures that I have of him, he's got a camera somewhere on his body.
Yeah.
And so when I was 12, I got interested in photography, and I started filming or shooting photographs. And by the time I was 13, I had a wet and dry darkroom and was doing the whole darkroom photographic routine regularly, and
developing
I did that.
all your photos.
Right. So I'd buy my film in bulk, and then I was on all the yearbook staffs through middle school on up through high school, and my last yearbook from high school has so many of my photographs in it that you could call it a portfolio, and it's a fairly substantial book because I hadn't joined the church until after I was from college, through college. And then, my journey originally was in photography, and I wanted to be a photographer, but then my mom, one evening, after she got home from work and I got home from high school, my senior year, she pulled out a course catalog from Montana State University, and she was flipping through, and she goes, "Oh, look at this! They have a degree in film and TV production." And I had already registered and was accepted at another college in another field, but in 5 seconds, literally 5 seconds, that was it. And then she leafed through a little bit more, and she goes, "Oh, look at that! You can get an emphasis in cinematography." And during this conversation, I had a piece of film in my hand because I had just come up from my darkroom in the basement. And that's it. I've never looked back.
All due respect to Montana, it's not what you'd consider as a hotbed of that type of industry, right?
Well, my father was military.
Seems unusual. Yeah.
Right. So my father was military, and we lived all over the world. So at that point, I was in Virginia, but we were still residents of Montana. So for me to go to college was basically free.
Yeah, right.
at that point.
That's great.
And so I went to college, and again, I was not an Adventist until after I finished college. And what's significant about that is that for me, it was Hollywood.
Right.
You know, that was my mindset. That was where my direction was.
That's where you're going to go.
That's where I'm going.
If that's what you do. Yeah.
You know, and the whole purpose of going to Hollywood is to make it big. And for me, it was to make it big as a cinematographer. You know, and you can make a very good living as a cinematographer, you know, when you're working at that level. But getting there, you know, in Hollywood, it's very competitive. It's difficult to get work. And the reason is you're not there unless you really want to be there. And if you don't want to be there, you won't be there long because the vibe just won't, you know, people on set, no, he's not, no, we're not going to call him again. You know, and so there's a lot of competition.
You did go to Hollywood after college.
I did, yeah. I moved to Hollywood and Vine. I was a block from the Walk of Stars.
Wow.
And but that was after I had come into the church, like just after I came into the church. So it took me, admittedly, it took me years to get Hollywood out of my system.
Well, yeah, especially since you're working there.
Yeah, and so what happened was I started working in features, but it was taking me away from the family too much. So then I kind of redirected into my commercial work, and I got into infomercials when they were first coming out, like the Super Chopper and the vacuum sucker bag and the scratch remover on the car.
The clap, you know, when you turn off the lights or
Yep, I did one of those.
Remember the
too.
spray paint for the bald spot?
Yeah, I've done
great
those. Yeah, and so I've shot over 300 of those over the years.
Yeah.
But then that started to slow down, and then I started getting into some of my other work, which there's a picture up right now. That is on a John Denver shoot several years before he passed. But the guy with me is George Adams, who is a lighting director, and I was just camera operating at that point. But I was just into the church at this point, and my direction was, you know, being more spiritual at that point. This next picture. So when I got into the church, I walked into the producer's office of George Vandeman, It Is Written, David Jones, and I was so fresh in the church, like just a few months, and he looks at me and he goes, "Would you like to go to GC?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to go to GC."
What is it?
And my next question was, "What is it?"
What's GC? Yeah.
And so I went to GC with the church, and that would have been Atlanta, 1985.
Okay, and just in case we have some viewers that don't know, that is General Conference.
General Conference, right?
Every 5-year
years.
meetings, right? Okay.
And so I got into working with the church, and that went into this previous picture, the Revive. That was one of Doug Batchelor's. So I've worked with Doug Batchelor and a lot of the more well-known evangelists in the church, but that was because of my association with the media center in Los Angeles at that point. About that time, I was also getting into work with PBS, the Nature Series. So I have several shows on PBS. This particular one with the snake on the table was about pythons invading the Everglades, which is a real problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah, serious problem. And so I've done quite a bit of work there. That's another shot there with the host of the show, Nigel Marvin. He is a BBC producer with the BBC in England. And so when they would come to the United States, they would hire me to do all their camera work. And so it provided a lot of opportunity to get into some pretty interesting work. And I've discovered that my career's been quite eclectic because I've had a very broad kind of. I never got really pigeonholed into one thing, which has been nice.
Which helps you survive.
Yeah, in some respects. This is out in the Everglades. We were on this particular job. The mosquitoes were so bad. I took my daughter on this job, and I took my shirt off one night, and I said, "Count the bites on my back," and she quitted 100.
No.
And so that was just like in a 2-hour period I got all these mosquito bites. But it was quite interesting.
Rich, you're a Florida native,
Yeah,
if memory
I don't
serves.
miss it at
Yeah. It's the state bird, the mosquito,
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a shot of a python eating an alligator, which at that had never really happened before. But when the pythons came in, people didn't think that the alligators would be affected, and they just the pythons are affecting.
Yeah.
The
This is proof
yeah.
to the contrary, right?
This is just. I thought this was kind of a fun shot. This is a very typical load of equipment. So when we have all of our lighting and audio and stuff, and there's always we always fill our vans full of
Sarah, you
stuff.
take a tablet or a computer and that's it.
This is worse than a musician's van, by the way.
And there's 4 of us in there plus all that equipment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this next shot, I've also gotten into some photography. This was on a shoot that I did with Rich with iShare in Los Angeles. It's like the
It's up at Griffith Park.
yeah, the Call Porter Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And this here is a 7-shot stack of HDR photo, and this is downtown Hollywood. And so that was, one of the shots that I
From Griffith Park.
from
Right.
Griffith, the Griffith
By
Observatory.
the observatory,
Yeah,
right.
looking down over Hollywood.
Just right by the Hollywood sign there.
Yeah. There's my dad. That was supposed to be a little bit earlier, but this that's him on the left. He was in Vietnam, and he's got the camera.
There he is.
Yeah, yeah. England. I've done some work with Pat Arabito with LLT Productions. Hell and Mr. Fudge was one movie that I worked on.
Jeff Wood.
Jeff.
Yes.
I was second unit director of photography. Dave Brillhart was the main director of photography. But this was the Seventh Day series. It was a 7-part series on the Sabbath. And so we traveled quite a bit on that series. There's Pat with another van full of equipment. This particular shot is with another Faith for Today production. This was the Evidence with Dwight Nelson that was out a number of years ago.
I see my friend Mike Tucker there, and Dwight, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Familiar faces.
Yep. This is some more PBS stuff. The thing about PBS, it allows you to get into some really unique places. And so we were able to film the sea lions on the coast of Santa Cruz. And I need to show this picture. That's a human body there in the front, laying on the ground. That is that's the Knoxville, Tennessee Body Farm. And a very unique place to film, and not many people get to film there. So I'll finish with that. So they do forensic science there for forensics.
Okay.
So it's a university for forensics.
Yeah.
We are very blessed to have you. When you did become a member of our church, we're blessed to be the beneficiaries of your work. And that's to both of you as well, Sari and Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today. To our viewers at home, go to our website, visitinspire.org, and we thank you for viewing, and join us on our next episode of Inspire.